A DC tinha fé no potencial da Mulher Maravilha como marca registrada. O Batman possuía 2 seriados cinematográficos e fizera uma participação no programa de rádio do Super-Homem. O Super-Homem alcançou um público maior com as histórias de sua juventude em Smallville. O Super-Homem era um símbolo nacional. Nos anos 40, a missão do Homem de Aço era definida assim.
Superman fights a never-ending battle for truth and justice.
By the 1950s and the introduction of the Superman television show, of course, it became
Truth, justice, and the American way.
That phrase, the American way, was all over the place in the 1950s, because now we're stuck in a Cold War.
O Super-Homem era mais popular do que nunca, mas seus criadores, Jerry Siegel e Joe Shuster, não puderam aproveitar. Alguns anos antes, eles haviam processado a DC para reaver os direitos sobre o Super-Homem e os milhões de dólares em royalties que a editora lhes devia. Em 48, eles perderam a batalha e a DC os demitiu.
Jerry Siegel was essentially fired from the strip that he had created.
Pelo menos Siegel e Shuster não estavam na linha de fogo quando a indústria dos quadrinhos foi atacada.
A psychiatrist named Frederick Wertham suddenly got on a soapbox and began preaching against comic books.
Nascido em Munique, Wertham havia sido psiquiatra-chefe do Hospital Bellevue, em Nova York, e diretor de uma clínica psiquiátrica popular no Harlem. Nos anos 40, iniciou um estudo sobre comportamentos anormais em pacientes jovens.
He went around from prison to prison interviewing juvenile prisoners. And one of the questions we asked him was, what do you read? Well, he discovered that all of them read comics. Ergo, comics are destroying our society.
I think he had a genuine concern for kids, which got out of control.
O ataque de Wertham começou em 48 e a febre anti-quadrinhos se espalhou pelo mundo.
Comic books were seen overseas as this virus of American culture and crime. Since they couldn't keep up with us militarily or economically anymore, they could at least try to fight against our culture.
Em seu livro de 54, A Sedução dos Inocentes, Wertham atacou até o Homem de Aço, cunhando o termo complexo de super-homem. Wertham definiu a condição como fantasias de alegria sádica ao ver outras pessoas sendo punidas enquanto você permanece imune. Batman e Robin eram a realização do sonho de 2 homossexuais vivendo juntos. E a Mulher Maravilha era o oposto do que as jovens devem ser.
He had the title doctor in front of his name, and people listened to him. He was a good huckster, got a lot of publicity, and it almost destroyed the comic book business. And a lot of people were saying, good riddance, if that happened.
Em 54, os senadores Estes Kefauver e Robert Hendrickson realizaram audiência sobre o efeito da cultura popular sobre os jovens.
They were kind of like a B-movie precursor to the Army McCarthy hearings, which were occurring at right about the same time. And they were both about equally ridiculous.
Quando a atenção do comitê se voltou para os quadrinhos, o Dr. Wertham foi a principal testemunha, dizendo coisas como: essas revistas são glorificações obscenas da violência e do crime. As crianças foram seduzidas pelo super-homem e Hitler era um amador comparado à indústria dos quadrinhos.
Every American saw us in this horrifically negative light. And then as an industry, we just bent over for the government.
Temendo a censura, a maioria das editoras de quadrinhos criou uma organização de autocensura que emitiria selos de aprovação.
Everything that was published had to be sent first to this organization, and they had to put the seal of approval on it, indicating that the stories weren't too sexy, weren't too violent, and would in no way upset any young or older reader.
Nas histórias aprovadas, o super-homem trabalhava em conjunto com as autoridades da lei. Batman e Robin conheciam mais garotas e a Mulher Maravilha passava mais tempo com Steve. Mas os relacionamentos dos heróis não passavam de paixões adolescentes.
That instilled that belief in the American public that comics are strictly a kid's medium. I mean, we're still fighting against that stigma today.
O código também aplicava regras rígidas de conteúdo. Sobre as autoridades dizia: policiais, juízes, oficiais e instituições do governo não devem ser representados de modo a criar desrespeito pela autoridade estabelecida. Sobre os pais, dizia: o respeito aos pais, à moral e ao comportamento digno deve ser incentivado. Sobre a atividade paranormal, dizia: cenas com mortos-vivos, vampiros e lobisomens estão proibidas. Muitas editoras faliram. Muitos escritores, desenhistas e lobisomens deixaram a indústria.
No respectable person wanted to be involved in that field. There are many stories of the comic book artists ending up in the alleys and basements of churches and ending up alcoholic.
And they did this right at the time when rock and roll was starting to break. That rebellious side of youth culture was becoming more pronounced in other media, and the comic book industry gave up that edge. They lost it, and in some ways they never quite recovered from that.
Entre 54 e 56, as vendas de quadrinhos caíram em mais de 50%. A indústria nunca mais teria o número de leitores que teve antes do Dr. Werthon e das audiências do Senado. A censura aplacou as críticas o bastante para salvar a indústria. Mas, e quanto aos super-heróis? Eles sobreviveriam?
They were a dirty little secret that you read under the covers of your bed. They were the kind of thing that if your parents caught you reading them, you might get in trouble.
Em 56, o editor Julius Schwartz supervisionou a criação do Flash, uma versão moderna do herói mais rápido dos anos 40. A DC teve sucesso com as atualizações de antigos personagens: o Lanterna Verde, o Gavião Negro e o Átomo. Enquanto isso, em um campo de golfe de Nova York, a história dos quadrinhos estava para mudar.
Publisher Martin Goodman played golf with the publisher of DC Comics.
At least the legend is the publisher of DC Comics said, you know, we've actually had some luck with these superheroes.
Quando os heróis novos e antigos uniram forças na Liga da Justiça, a série rendeu a DC um título de sucesso. Se a DC teve sorte, a situação era bem diferente na Timely, onde os artistas criavam histórias conservadoras estreladas por monstros gigantes, e estavam cansados disso.
I would make up a name like Gru or Mungor or anything that was a sound, and Jack would make a story out of it any way he wanted, and I'd put in the insipid copy.
Então Martin Goodman voltou do jogo de golfe encantado com a Liga da Justiça.
Stan, I want you to make up a group of heroes, because I think that's what's selling today.
Stan pediu a opinião de sua esposa Joan.
She said, well, why don't you just once do a book the way you would like to do it instead of the way they want you to do it?
She's like, well, you're going to quit anyway. Just do it.
Stan Lee took the problem to his sometime collaborator Jack Kirby, and they came up with the Fantastic Four.
Inspiradas pela corrida espacial entre os Estados Unidos e a Rússia, 4 pessoas que vivem discutindo tentam chegar à Lua. A nave delas é bombardeada por raios cósmicos. Quando os 4 aterrissam, descobrem que têm superpoderes e se transformam em um grupo, mas continuam discutindo.
Mr. Fantastic would over-explain everything, the way I tend to do. The Thing would say, will you shut up, we got it already, and he and the Torch were always arguing and fighting.
The Thing hated being the Thing, and the idea of superheroes hating being a superhero was really a novelty, and it produced a lot of psychological richness, at least comparatively speaking, that had not been seen in comic books before. And so it was with the creation of the Fantastic Four that comic books really entered into the modern era.
Lee convenceu Goodman a renomear a empresa como Marvel, em homenagem à primeira revista de Goodman, que tinha o Tocha Humana original e o Príncipe Submarino. Lee e Kirby já haviam criado um novo Tocha Humana e em 62 ressuscitaram o Príncipe Submarino. Lee deu a Namor um texto mais rebuscado e uma nova razão para odiar a humanidade. Ele culpava os testes atômicos por destruir sua cidade subaquática. Também em 62, Lee e Kirby criaram outro anti-herói da era atômica, o incrível Hulk.
Of course, in those days, there were so many movies with nuclear blasts creating monsters and giant things and so forth. So I said there was a gamma ray explosion and he got caught in it and it transformed him.
O Hulk era uma metáfora para o medo de que as armas nucleares saíssem de controle. Ao salvar um jovem que invadiu a área de testes da bomba de raios gama, o Dr. Bruce Banner torna-se vítima de sua própria invenção.
It was Banner's dark side, just sort of, metamorphosizing into flesh and blood. Green flesh and blood, of course, but there it was.
Sempre que Banner se transformava, o exército tentava matá-lo.
Even while the Vietnam War was going on, the Hulk's most persistent adversary was the U.S. Army. The Comics Code said that, you couldn't show the Army as villains. And yet at the same time, Marvel was basically making them to be the bad guys. They're able to do this simply by saying the Army is trying to do what it thinks is best. It just happens to be a little misinformed in this case.
The Hulk looked like a menace. He looked like a monster.
There was nobody else who understood him except the teenager whose life he saved, Rick Jones. The teenager understands. But the world doesn't understand.
Personagens como Hulk conquistaram uma nova geração de leitores que cresceram questionando a autoridade.
Here's this character, when he loses his cool, he becomes this green monster. And he goes on tirades and he just starts smashing things up. What better metaphor, could you have for angry youth?
We started to get fan mail. And the postmarks suddenly weren't from kindergartens, but they were from high schools and then later from colleges.
Se mais leitores eram jovens, Lee imaginou que gostariam de um herói jovem. Seu patrão não tinha tanta certeza.
You say that he's a teenager? A hero can only be an adult. Teenagers are sidekicks. And you say you want him to have problems. Stan, don't you know what a hero is?
It's interesting that in the 1930s, you had the country seemingly falling apart, and yet you had these superheroes come in that were totally confident in their ability to resolve these problems. And then in the Kennedy years, the early 60s, things seemed to be fairly stable, and yet you had the Marvel superheroes come in who were vulnerable and confused and disoriented. The difference was the baby boomers. They were notoriously self-absorbed. All this was magnified in popular culture geared towards youth. James Dean, for example, he may look tough on the outside, but his heart is breaking and he wants to be accepted and he's unsure and his parents don't understand him and the world doesn't understand him.
Peter Parker é um estudante tímido que vive com o tio Ben e a tia May. Quando a mordida de uma aranha radiativa lhe dá superpoderes, ele nem pensa em combater o crime e entra para o show business. Mas ao deixar fugir o ladrão, que depois mataria seu tio, Peter aprende que um grande poder traz grandes responsabilidades.
People ask me where I came up with the line, "With great power must also come great responsibility." And I have no idea.
O editor da Marvel, Martin Goodman, tinha tão pouca fé na ideia que publicou o Homem-Aranha em uma revista fracassada de ficção científica em 62. Então, Goodman viu as vendagens.
He said, Stan, you remember that Spider-Man character of yours that we both liked so much? Why don't we do a series about it?
O Homem-Aranha tornou-se o maior sucesso da Marvel. Um dos responsáveis era Steve Ditko, que trabalhou com o personagem até 66.
After a while, he would give me the artwork for a 20-page story. I didn't know what it was, and I would put the dialogue balloons in because Steve told a story so beautifully that you almost didn't need the dialogue.
Antes da mordida da aranha, a vida de Peter Parker era uma confusão. Depois dos superpoderes, virou uma confusão ainda maior. Todos os leitores se identificavam com isso.
It's not about that red and blue suit. It's about Peter Parker, the sick aunt, the girl problems, the school problems, the work problem. It's not just a suit jumping off the building. There's somebody inside of that suit that you care about.
Os heróis da DC, como o Super-Homem e o Batman, agiam como os pais dos leitores. Os da Marvel agiam como os leitores. De certa forma, isso já era verdade nos anos 40.
At that time, the worldview presented in DC comic books was a much simpler, easier to understand kind of worldview. Superman was good, Lex Luthor was evil. As I got older and, more sophisticated, 10, 11, then I started to look for greater degrees of ambiguity in my characters, and that meant that it was time to graduate to Marvel Comics.
DC was the old establishment company. Marvel was the upstart that led people to believe there was a rivalry, and there became a rivalry when Marvel started outselling DC. Then it became very real in terms of, good old bottom line.
Uma das jogadas mais corajosas da Marvel ocorreu em 64, quando Stan Lee e Jack Kirby ressuscitaram o Capitão América, o eterno herói da Segunda Guerra desenhado por Kirby. Os leitores descobriram que o Capitão ficou congelado no gelo por 20 anos e que seu parceiro Bucky havia morrido em combate. O infalível herói da Segunda Guerra culpava a si mesmo pela morte de Bucky. E entre as lutas, o Capitão América se lamentava como um Hamlet moderno.
He felt he didn't belong to our age. He was, as I say, an anachronism. He belonged back in the 40s. Jack hadn't done him that way, and I felt a little bit diffident mentioning it to him. But, oh man, Jack loved the idea instantly.
O desconforto do Capitão América espelhava o do país. As certezas do passado eram substituídas por um espírito de rebelião.
We look at what Stan did back in the 60s, and we may say, oh wow, I remember those stories really fondly, and they kind of read kind of quaint and kind of simplistic, and maybe they were appealing to kids. Well, no. Back in the 60s, they didn't read that way. They were cutting edge. There was almost counterculture at the time.
There was a survey conducted by Esquire magazine in 1965 which revealed that self-described college radicals ranked Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk among their favorite revolutionary icons, right there with Bob Dylan and Che Guevara and Malcolm X.
There was a time in the 60s where comics were seen as very smart in the colleges of America, and Stan had his finger right on that pulse.
Em 68, a Marvel vendia 55 milhões de revistas por ano, igualando ou superando a DC. E as histórias tomaram um rumo mais psicodélico quando um ex-mágico chamado Jim Steranko assumiu as páginas de Nick Fury, agente da S.H.I.E.L.D.
I brought surrealism to comics. I brought expressionism into comics. I brought pop art and op art, optical effects into comics.
Steranko probably had more effect on the comic industry with fewer comics than anyone in history.
There was this whole cult of personality created around Steranko. You didn't hear his first name, it was just Steranko. And he was very aloof, and, the pictures you saw of him were grainy and blurry, and, it's just this whole mystique around Steranko.
Steranko foi o primeiro grande astro dos quadrinhos. Como um astro do rock, ele desafiava as fronteiras do que a censura considerava aceitável nos anos 60.
They used to take the cleavage line out of my girls.
Algumas alterações eram bizarras. Em uma sequência sem falas entre Fury e sua namorada, um simples abraço foi apagado e substituído por uma ampliação da arma de Fury.
This huge pistol shoved into the confines of a shoulder holster was much more suggestive than anything I had on that page.
Mas enquanto a Marvel desafiava os limites com Nick Fury, heróis negros como Pantera Negra e filósofos cósmicos como o Surfista Prateado, um dos super-heróis mais antigos recebia uma nova chance. Em 66, o Batman chegou à televisão. O programa era uma versão humorística do Justiceiro Mascarado, e logo a Batmania varreu o país. A revista do Batman, que perdera muitos leitores após anos de histórias medíocres, dobrou de tiragem, vendendo quase 900 mil cópias por mês.
On the one hand, it sparked a huge upsurge in the popularity of superheroes. On the other hand, the resurgence in interest in comic books have been based largely on taking these characters seriously. You talk to people even today, bring up the topic of superheroes and they'd say, oh, biff, bam, pow, and ridiculous.
A piada logo se esgotou. Em 69, a série saiu do ar e as vendas da revista do Batman caíram em quase 60%. Para o público geral, os super-heróis voltaram a ser coisa de criança e o clima do país não tinha nada de infantil.
We were teetering between the Vietnam anti-war rebellion and the Watergate years. The whole social structure was beginning to open to criticism for the first time.
O renascimento dos super-heróis nos anos 50 estava colidindo com a contracultura. Para manter os leitores, especialmente o público universitário, os super-heróis precisavam mudar. A DC queria atualizar a Mulher Maravilha para 68. O escritor e artista Mike Sekowsky começou o processo e o jornalista Danny O'Neill foi contratado para finalizar a modernização da Mulher Maravilha. Não seria fácil, como O'Neill descobriu.
When you get a job like that, implicit in it is shake it up, do something new.
A DC eliminou o uniforme e os poderes da Mulher Maravilha e a fez aprender karatê. Eles esperavam que uma abordagem mais realista fosse bem recebida pelo movimento feminino. Mas líderes feministas como Gloria Steinem, que cresceram com a versão original, odiaram as mudanças.
They said that I had taken the only powerful woman in comics and had taken her power away from her. It is now many years later and I absolutely see what they were talking about.
Após 4 anos, a DC concordou com Gloria Steinem e devolveu os poderes e o uniforme da Mulher Maravilha.
So, not one of the more glorious chapters in my comic book career.
O'Neill teve mais sorte com outro herói cujas vendas estavam caindo, o Batman. O editor da DC, Julius Schwartz, queria apagar a mancha do seriado de TV e voltar às raízes do personagem.
As a loner who never showed his face in the light, was the way I remembered those early Bill Finger, Bob Kane stories.
Schwartz convocou o artista Neil Adams, que trouxe um realismo dinâmico aos super-heróis.
Neil once said, if superheroes existed, they would have to look the way I draw them. And I think that's absolutely right.
O Batman do início dos anos 70 era uma temível criatura da noite pela primeira vez em 30 anos. O'Neill e Adams haviam tirado o personagem das garras do seriado. Mas seu próximo trabalho de renovação envolveria uma mudança maior. O'Neill e Adams levariam o comentário social nos quadrinhos a um nível inédito. O editor da DC, Julius Schwartz, achava que incluir mensagens nas aventuras do Lanterna Verde podia salvar o título do cancelamento.
So let's try it. Let's see if we can start using as a springboard what's happening in the newspapers.
O Lanterna Verde era um herói com muito poder e nenhuma personalidade. Um agente de uma força policial cósmica que usava seu anel do poder para enfrentar supervilões e criaturas espaciais.
I had thought of Green Lantern as an enforcer of the status quo. So we needed a contrast with that. Green Arrow is a character dating back to the 40s, never had his own title, had appeared in anthology books, and was kind of a Batman with a bow and arrow. But he was really bland, so we made him the voice of the streets, the voice of the left.
Em 1970, a Lanterna Verde, Arqueiro Verde número 76, chegou às bancas como um coquetel Molotov. Era abertamente liberal. O arqueiro diz aos leitores que um câncer moral está apodrecendo a América. O Lanterna Verde é acusado de ser racista.
What I remember putting in the script was asking Neil to draw the best face he had ever drawn, of a black guy who had been through hell. And he did it. And he starts to say something about, well, I hear you've been helping the blue skins and the green skins on these other planets.
You've done a lot for the purple skins. What have you done for the black skins? It's one of the most reprinted panels in comics history. When you look back at it, well, what's so radical about this? But at the time, it was an outrageous proposition.
My theory was that it was probably too late for my generation. But maybe you get a real smart 12-year-old and get him thinking about racism.
A revista Lanterna Verde, Arqueiro Verde, apostava em sua relevância. Abordava religião, raça, poluição e direitos indígenas. Mas havia temas de que todas as revistas se afastavam. Um deles era a maior polêmica da época, o Vietnã. No início dos anos 60, alguns personagens se envolveram com a guerra. Mas quando o conflito e os protestos chegaram ao auge, o assunto passou a ser evitado.
I think that generally there was a feeling that was a scary topic.
Letters would come in from fans saying, hey, how come Captain America doesn't go to Vietnam like and fight the commies there, and like he did the Nazis in World War II?
Os heróis da Marvel haviam enfrentado os comunistas nos anos 60, mas ao fim da década, a Guerra Fria não parecia um assunto relevante.
After a while, I think we weren't that sure that the communists were the greatest evil in the world. I tried to avoid stories about the war. The Vietnam War, to me, was too tragic a thing.
By the time we got the courage to do material about Vietnam, I think the war was pretty much over.
Outra questão não abordada eram as drogas. Até que, ironicamente, a administração Nixon forçou o assunto em 71.
I had received a letter from the government, from the Office of Health, Education and Welfare. They thought it would really be beneficial if I would get a story about the dangers of drug addiction and feature it in one of our top books.
Lee e os artistas Hugh Kane e John Romita criaram uma saga de 3 edições em que o Homem-Aranha enfrentava o Duende Verde. Em uma história paralela, o Aranha salva um garoto tão drogado que acha que pode voar.
I know nothing about drugs, so I didn't mention what he overdosed on. I didn't know.
Depois, um amigo do Homem-Aranha, Harry, o filho do Duende Verde, vicia-se em comprimidos e tem uma overdose quase fatal.
The reader didn't feel we were giving him a lecture. It was just an incident in a story, which I feel is the best way to do it.
Só havia um problema. O órgão de censura não queria que ele fizesse isso.
Rejected. We could not put the seal of approval on those issues. I said, why? They said, according to the code, you're not allowed to mention drugs. I said, but we're not telling the kids to take drugs. The whole purpose of this is to show the danger of drug addiction. Doesn't matter, you're not allowed to mention drugs.
Para resolver o impasse, Lee recorreu a Martin Goodman.
Said, Martin, I want to do these books anyway, so we won't have the seal of approval. I was so proud of him. He backed me to the hilt. He said, absolutely, Stan, just let's send him out.
Por 3 meses, a Marvel publicou o Homem-Aranha sem a aprovação.
The world didn't end, the sky didn't fall. We had the greatest write-ups.
My father came home and he said, you have to go pick up this thing called Spider-Man. I'm like, why? Of course, what he didn't realize at the time was that he started a whole new addiction, which was comic books. So, coincidentally, I never used drugs, but boy, I collected comic books like crazy.
Graças à polêmica, a censura diminuiu. Pouco depois, a DC lançou uma história muito mais forte com um antigo parceiro do Arqueiro Verde, Ricardito, viciado em heroína. Ela não apenas foi aprovada, como o prefeito de Nova York, John Lindsay, escreveu uma carta de recomendação. Mas boas intenções não se traduzem em vendas. 2 edições depois, a revista foi cancelada. Os temas polêmicos perderam o impacto, mas a durabilidade do primeiro super-herói nunca foi questionada. Ao longo dos anos, muitos escritores e artistas redefiniram o super-homem. O personagem sobreviveu porque podia ser reinterpretado para refletir a época. O filme de 78, estrelado por Christopher Reeve, manteve a história básica e adicionou um toque de sexo e romance.
First Superman is wonderful. It's a really great origin story. If you like the comics, I think Part 2 appeals to you even more because, he's fighting superpowered villains.
3 anos antes do lançamento do filme, o projeto tornou-se um marco para os criadores do Super-Homem, Jerry Siegel e Joe Shuster. Nos anos 40, eles haviam processado a DC pelos direitos sobre o herói e perdido. Em 75, o artista Neil Adams abraçou a causa deles. Aproveitando a publicidade do filme, ele pressionou a DC a se retratar. Naquele ano, Siegel e Shuster receberam uma modesta pensão vitalícia e recuperaram o crédito de criação. mas a DC manteve os direitos. Os 2 primeiros filmes foram enormes sucessos de bilheteria e o valor do Super-Homem como produto foi reconfirmado. Mas ele não era mais o herói mais popular dos quadrinhos. O gosto dos leitores sofreu uma mutação. Os X-Men nem sempre lidavam com questões políticas específicas, mas eram relevantes em um sentido mais amplo.
The X-Men are very relevant because above and beyond everything else, it's a story of bigotry, of these people who are hated because they're different, even though they're good. And they're trying to help the world. I mean, there's almost a little bit of a Jesus Christ feeling in there.
The X-Men are sort of the most consciously, deliberately, and successfully metaphorical of any comic book superhero.
Os X-Men são uma equipe de mutantes adolescentes, todos com poderes que se manifestaram na puberdade.
More mutants are starting to get born. The fear grows even more amongst normal human beings that they will take over the earth.
Growing up in Israel, I understood the metaphor. It was about the right to live and the right to exist.
If you're African American growing up reading comic books, you could relate to the X-Men. If you were gay growing up reading comic books, you could relate to the X-Men. If you were merely just a geek, a nerd being picked on, you could relate to the X-Men. The idea of being simultaneously special and persecuted is a very potent, powerful one.
Os X-Men foram criados por Stan Lee e Jack Kirby em 63, mas não decolaram até o final dos anos 70, com histórias de Chris Claremont, arte de Dave Cockrum e John Byrne, e novos mutantes como Tempestade e especialmente Wolverine.
He's got that whole bad boy thing going on. It's James Dean, sort of Clint Eastwood kind of attitude to him.
Wolverine was the kind of character you could not have had in the 1960s because he was very much a reflection of that cynicism and sense of irony that came out of the 60s, that came out of Vietnam and Watergate. Wolverine was a superhero for Generation X. He wasn't afraid to take it to the bad guys exactly the way they would take it to you, or worse.
I know as kids we were always fascinated by Wolverine's adamantium claws. But it was just the idea of having a weapon so handy all the time, never having to reach for it, just, snap.
Wolverine, de certa forma, foi o precursor do herói sombrio. Nos anos 80, uma nova geração de artistas levaria esse conceito a outro nível.
It was really up to people of my generation to basically get Batman his balls back.